It's time to talk basketball. I'm Jose Salviati, editor at thebeachbasket.net. He's Steve Persciello, a longtime educator, vice principal, and athletic director. And this is the 13 Rules Random NBA Thoughts podcast. Undeniably the best 15 minutes of random thoughts online. If this is your first time listening, as always, thank you. We are so grateful and thankful that you found us. This podcast is born out of Steve's articles that he creates weekly called NBA Random Thoughts. 13 Rules NBA Random Thoughts. Steve and I have exactly 15 minutes to discuss what's on his mind around the NBA. Today, we'll discuss his latest 13 Rules Random NBA Thoughts article. Steve, are you ready?
Ready.
Let's do this. I'm going to start the timer now. All right. The focus this week was on coaches on the hot seat, as well as some random thoughts mixed in. So we're going to talk a little bit about some coaches that might be in trouble, and then a little random thought at the end. We'll start with a team that we don't talk a lot about, really, and that's the Charlotte Hornets. Their coach, Steve Clifford, is on the hot seat, despite being well-respected in the coaching industry. So I got to ask, what went wrong in Charlotte if a coach is well-respected as Steve Clifford can't get things done there?
No talent and new ownership. Those two things, you put them together, and they're going to want their own person. I believe they just hired a new GM or a new president of the operation. I'm sure he's going to want to clean the house, and that leaves Clifford out of work. Don't forget, Clifford was hired after Kenny Atkinson turned the job down a couple of years ago. So he was not their first choice. This is his second go-around with them. He does a great job. I think the players like playing for him. But at this point, it's just natural when a new owner in a new situation, they're bringing their people. And I don't think Clifford is their people. But Charlotte has a major problem. They don't have good players. They have a few, but not enough to compete with the good teams.
Yeah.
So, I don't know where it's going to go. It's going to take a while, and whomever they hire is going to need a couple years. It's not something you would judge his work after next year.
Yeah. This show's called Random Thoughts. Your article's called Random Thoughts. I got a random thought for you. It just came up. I got two situations for you. You got a team with phenomenal players, a great team. Let's say the Denver Nuggets. And then you got a team, that's kind of floundering, not a good team, not great players. Let's say the Charlotte Hornets. You take the best coach in the NBA, historically, any great coach, give that coach to the Charlotte Hornets. And then you take me and you put me in charge of the Denver Nuggets. What's going to happen? Are the Denver Nuggets going to tank? Or are the Charlotte Hornets going to all of a sudden be really, really good? Who's going to have the greater impact? Me with the Nuggets or Red Auerbach with the Hornets?
Well, first of all, before we even make that crazy analogy, you'd be fired in the first week. But there used to be like an old thing where they said, that coach is so good, he can beat you with his or yours. I think obviously Denver's always going to win more games. Right. They've got so much more talent. But I think every team's got an area where before a season you sit there and say, okay, bad year they'll win this, good year they'll win that. First, Charlotte, you'd probably say something like bad year 15, good year 25 to 30.
Yeah.
So you can, again, measure your coach accordingly. The other factor that you got to bring into it is injuries. Charlotte's been killed by injuries. LaMelo Ball's been out most of the season for the second year of that. So, that doesn't help in the quantifying it. You got to look at what you have and then figure it out. But I think, in this case, it's just complicated because it's new owners. And they're not going to want to present the same old mess that they have. So they got to put a little paint on the building. And by putting a paint, that means getting a new coach.
Yep. Agreed. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it comes down right to players. Coaches certainly have an impact, but you got to have the players. You got to have a good team of players. and a coach that can kind of maneuver that and manage those egos. But it all starts with good players.
One of the first things you learn when I coached, one of the first things I learned was, if we're going to win, I got to get better horses.
Yeah,
I can coach all night and
right.
know all this stuff, but when you lose them by 30, you're going to draw a nice play. It doesn't work.
Right.
So it's all about
Yep.
the athlete.
Boom. Well, speaking of good players, the Cleveland Cavaliers have got good players. They're a good team. They're a 45-win team. Currently, or at least as of yesterday, third in the very tough Eastern Conference. They were undeniably the hottest team in the NBA just about a month back. But you wrote that their coach, JB Bickerstaff, should be worried. Why?
Because I think for a while now, they're looking to make incremental progress. If they get knocked out in the first round, that's not incremental progress.
Yeah.
They went out and they got in Strus. They brought in Strus and they brought Niang in. The problem was they felt they didn't have a bench, and against the Knicks in the playoffs, they didn't shoot well as didn't rebound well. So they figured these two guys would help them as a shooting team. So they did make these steps to improve themselves. They've been beat up with injuries. Nobody's going to argue that. But now they're starting to get healthy. Mitchell played last night and all the other good things. But God, if they don't get better, you got to think that Bickerstaff is going to be gone. Dan Gilbert just had a stroke. He's the owner a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
He's not real healthy, and I think he'd like to, be around the finals at some point. And if he doesn't see progress, you got to, you just have to do something.
Yeah. So you're saying specifically they're in trouble if they don't get out of the first round?
Yeah.
Second round?
I think he'll be okay, but next year he'll be on a tight, in a situation. And you know what? The other day, Miami beat them big. It shouldn't happen this time of year. And I know, again, Mitchell didn't play, and they're injured. And Strus has been out, but still, you don't get beat by 30. You don't get blown out of a game at this point in the year if you have dreams of going far. And I'm sure that didn't go over good. And it's going to become a point where Kobe Altman's the general manager. It's going to become a point where, for Altman's might have to save his neck. That means Bickerstaff goes. And Altman's done a decent job getting them better. So that's my sense. I could be wrong again.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, honestly, after talking to you now for years, right? You lean more on right than wrong. I'll give you that for sure.
We're still waiting.
Well, case in point, the Houston Rockets are charging for that play-in spot.
We're still waiting on that one. And believe me, I'm watching Houston games.
So am I. It's so close.
And Jalen Green is become a big-time player.
Yeah, no, it's fun to watch and certainly keeping an eye on that. I do think the Cleveland Cavaliers job, should it become available, would be by far the most attractive job for any coach, because this is a very, very good team, assuming they keep, their core in place.
It'll be an interesting thing if it does come open, what the GM does. I'd have to sit and think about who the experienced coaches are out there.
Yeah.
But if they bring an experienced coach in, the GM is going to be in trouble if he doesn't do well.
Yeah.
If they don't bring an experienced coach in, that he might be able to skate through that. But usually you can't fire 2 or 3 coaches when you're a GM. You got one. And then after that, it better work.
Yeah. So we'll definitely keep an eye on Cleveland, another high-profile team that we talk a lot about here because we cover the NBA, and the NBA is about, let's say, globally 2 teams, right? Boston Celtics and the Los Angeles Lakers.
I thought it was 1, but go ahead.
It's 2. It's 2. Their coach, Darvin Ham, has been in the hot seat really since the week after he started. And LA is a tough place to play because they demand greatness. Their fans do. I think their ownership does. And the Lakers really haven't been great. They've been mediocre. They did win in 2020, but that wasn't, it was before Ham. And with him, they've been, they've won in the sense that, they won the in-season tournament. They made it to the Western Conference Finals, which was not what was expected of them. But this is a chip or skip town, right? You win the chip or you skip town. You get out of here. Is that a fair way to assess coaches in general? I think you've answered that question actually earlier, but I want to ask it straight up. In LA, Darvin Ham's in trouble. Is that fair?
Let me ask you this. If they don't get out of the play-in round, who gets the heat, Pelinka or Ham?
Yeah, Ham. He's gone, undeniably.
Okay, there's your answer.
Yeah.
If they get into the playoffs and they lose the first round, what happens?
That's tough, right? You made the point earlier, right? You said that you've got to gauge the team based on, what their top ceiling is, right? And that's where I think the Lakers and Laker fans get a little unrealistic, right? They think their ceiling is always the final. It's not necessarily their ceiling. That's what you aspire to, and that's fine. But this team is constructed, I don't think is, especially when you look at the other teams in the West and even a lot of teams in the East, that the finals is, you got to get lucky to get there. This team's ceiling is not quite there. I would say second round Western Conference Final, that's it. So if they're out in the first, I think that is below expectations for sure. And then you got to have a conversation. But you get to the second round and you're out, then I think Darvin Ham has bought himself some time.
Oh yeah. First of all, you got to win 2 games to get into the playoffs.
Yeah.
So, you can't put, the cart ahead of the horse. And again, Bill Parcells, you are what your record says you are. Their record isn't real good. And think about this for a minute. Anthony Davis having a great year. But your best player is day to day. And he's 38 or so.
39.
Think about that. So you're asking for a 39-year-old man to carry you when he's got a bad ankle and he's having trouble, playing a couple games in a row. So is that unrealistic? And then you've got Austin Reeves is a nice player.
100%.
And D'Angelo Russell is the best guy on the court tonight, and tomorrow night he should be in the G League. So if you don't have any consistency,
right,
where are you going? Where are you going? And the rest of those guys are just complementary pieces or supplemental. They're not real good. They're getting more out of Jackson Hayes than I think he knew he had. So those are role players.
Yeah.
So the fans are a little bit crazy about where they are.
He said that. Laker fans, not me. He said that.
Yeah, I did.
Just being clear.
Be realistic. When a team, if the Cavaliers started talking about the title,
right,
you'd say you're crazy. And now I'll put the question to you: who's got more talent, the Cavaliers or the Lakers?
Yeah, that's your mic drop moment. Yeah, the Cavs. Yeah. Great point.
Yeah,
great point. I feel for Darvin Ham. I think he's done an okay job. He hasn't been perfect, but perfect coaches don't exist. You can make a few arguments, but not many. I think he's done okay with the Lakers.
I think it all in the middle of the year when a couple of players were turning on him doesn't say how it doesn't tell you how well that he's regarded well in the locker room.
Yeah.
And so if they do go down, I think fingers from every side are going to be pointed at him. The one thing I'll say, the Lakers don't spend a lot. I don't know how many years his contract is and how much. And I don't know if Jeannie Buss really likes to fire people.
Right.
So that might be to his
might be to his benefit. Let's see. I made the point earlier that the NBA globally was kind of about 2 teams. We talked about one. Let's talk about the other team, the Boston Celtics. I think it's a team Steve knows a little bit about. They were the best team in the association record-wise, but they had their first losing week of the season in week 23, right? So right now they're 0-2. I know they've got a game tonight, but at best they're going to be 1-2 this week. First losing week all season long. And they lost after being up 30. So I got to ask you, as a Boston fan, are other teams figuring out the Celtics? Is there a problem here? Other teams are heating up as the playoffs are starting. Are the Celtics cooling off? Are they in trouble?
I think they stopped playing defense. I think it's been a major problem. The other night, and even with Holiday and White playing, Murray took 44 shots. So, yeah, you take that many shots, you're going to score some points. But
Sure.
Bogdanovich as well, we're getting wide open off the dribble. And that tells me the defense wasn't there. The other interesting thing in that game, and Missoula tried to cover it after the game, but in the overtime, they kept running high screen and roll, trying to get Porzingis on Murray. And every time he did, Murray just beat him off with a jump shot. I'm sitting there, and Missoula said he was doing it because he's practicing situations, which sounds great. But you know what? I'm sitting there saying to myself, if he's doing this, A, either you take Porzingis out of the game, or B, you got to get the player guarding Murray through the screen. But you can't let Porzingis stay out on him. And he did it. So if he didn't make the adjustment, and it wasn't what he was saying, that he was just practicing something, that's a problem. And you've got to have the adjustments made. And Porzingis defensively in the last couple of weeks has not been nearly as good as he was earlier in the year. Now, Tatum, because it's a 1-point game at the end, Tatum's getting a lot of heat. He's really getting beat up about it. But you know what? When you think about it, if you defended all game and played, I want to offer one more on that, you wouldn't have had Tatum having to worry about that. And by the way, in the last 5 or 6 games, Boston is number 2 defensive rating in the league. Now, in the last 5 or 6 games, they are, I think, number 20. That tells me that they think it's over and they're just playing it out and figure they're going to win when they throw their
the proverbial switch.
Yeah, and it's not happening. Tonight will be interesting. They play Houston in about a half hour from when we're doing this. If they don't defend, I think there's going to be a little bit of fear, and they're going to play a game. But I don't know how you stop Zion. That's a rough thing to do, and I don't know if they're physical enough to do that unless Horford can guard them. But they're going to have a problem there. They'll probably use Drew Holiday on them, but they're going to have a problem. So that's my thought. And if they lose today, I think I'll say there's a problem.
Okay. So let me ask you this, and we'll end on that note. You heard the buzzer go off. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being I am ridiculously worried about this team, 1 being no way, Jose, no problems at all. What's your concern level with the Celtics?
5 or 6.
Wow, that's pretty high.
Well, no, it's not that high. It's middle. Again, during the game the other night, Boston put Pritchard in. Pritchard pressured, I guess, Murray up the court, full court. And when he got across, he threw a pass. Somebody deflected it. Boston picked it off. Common sense to me said that you needed to do that and take Atlanta out of comfort and to continue to bother them. That was the only time they did it the whole game. And that was one of the few times, that little stretch, Boston played better defense. That was it. That was it in the whole game. Last thing I'll say on the game, Bogdanovich hit the 3 at the last couple seconds in regulation to tie it. Now, they missed a shot. They got the rebound. Somewhere, a player who's guarding Bogdanovich is got to say, I'm not going to leave him until we have the ball.
Yeah.
What happened? Capella, who had a great game, rebounded it and kicked it out to him. He was wide open, and he's a good shooter. Sure. So the mental breakdowns really start becoming, huge. And that was what I saw when that happened.
All right. I honestly thought that you would be less concerned than a 5 or 6, but let's see how things play out. To me, they're still the scariest team, them in Denver. Being an LA guy, it pains me to say it, but I think a Nugget Celtics final would be epic.
Great series. Don't forget, and one more piece to the Celtic thing. When they're shooting over 40% from 3, they blow everybody out. The last 2 games, they haven't done that.
Okay. All right.
So that's another factor involved in this whole thing to watch. Anytime a team banks 2 or 3 threes in a row, that's 9 points. I mean, a game goes from close to a little margin.
Right.
And they're not shooting real well right now. They
Well,
don't
tonight
move the
against
ball.
the
Last
very
piece,
hot
they
Houston
don't
Rockets.
move the ball.
No, they're playing the Pelicans. A team, it's also really hot. I think it'll be a fun game to watch.
Good game.
All right. Well, that's it. You heard the buzzer go off, and you heard us continue to talk over it. It's kind of what we do. But please make sure to read Steve's entire article. It'll be linked below to get his thoughts on other teams tanking and a few other coaches who should be worried. That's it. Time's up. Thanks as always for listening. Please consider subscribing and join us next week on the 13 Rules NBA Random Thoughts podcast, the best 15 minutes of NBA Random Thoughts online. We'll talk next week, Steve. Thanks.
Take care.